and normalises viewing non-human people as food, objects, entertainment and commodities, when they are people who have the right to live.
What the does that mean?
You're welcome.
What the is he talking about?
Alright guys, we are back once again, and it seems as if all of the psycho YouTube vegan drama isn't even over yet. And all of these crazy ass YouTube vegans are just storming out of the woodworks right now, and are looking for smoke with just about anyone. I mean shit, we have even seen the return of lunatics like Vegan Gains, who is going after people like Asmongold for just some odd reason. And on top of that, we have also seen that vegan teacher going after smaller YouTubers like the Curl King while trying to collab with Nikocado Avocado. And if those two weren't enough for you, we now have that vegan teacher's daughter, who has now decided she will be starting beef with a random ass farmer who called her out on the news. And he seems to have a very good reason for calling her out at that. And it was for the pure fact that she has been harassing his town's local event called the Royal Show for the past few years now. And overall, this woman has become such an absolute menace for Australia that the news has taken it upon themselves to go ahead and call her out. And she actually goes ahead and gives a brief introduction about the things that she's done in the past at these events before she gets into her response. So we're going to try to hear her out and listen to her little introduction before we go ahead and listen to the absolute yapping that she decides to do. And we'll actually be trying to respond for right here, because I don't think homie is tech savvy enough at all to even be able to see this video, much less respond to her. So with that said, let's waste no more time and get straight on into this bullshit.
For those who don't know, the Royal Animal Agricultural Show is a week-long animal abuse and exploitation event that runs in Perth, Western Australia every year in September. In 2021, I did a disruption at the Royal Show. I actually went inside and went in the very middle of a cattle judging ring where animals were being exploited and viewed only as objects and food. I spoke out to the audience saying that animal slavery, abuse and murder is immoral. Whilst I was doing the speak out, holding a sign, a farmer came up from behind me and I had no idea he was there. He grabbed me by the back of my collar and the back of my shorts, giving me a massive wedgie and threw me around and pinned me against a fence. The following year, I returned to that very same cattle ring, this time with another animal rights activist, and we handcuffed and chained ourselves to the cattle ring, refusing to leave, once again to speak up for the animals being exploited for human entertainment and pleasure.
And you're paying for this rape and abuse and murder if you're not vegan!
And yeah, as you can tell, she just came here to cause problems for no reason. And she even said herself that she came here just to interrupt the event. But then she somehow immediately tries to play the victim in the beginning of this video. And she has the audacity to even act surprised that people would try to throw her out when she's sitting there in the middle of everything, screaming like a moron. And the craziest part about all of this to me is that the animals at this event look really well taken care of, and are show animals, so they're probably out here eating better than a quarter of the entire population. And it just never ceases to amaze me how she manages to pick the worst events to go and try and protest. And instead of protesting a viable location, like a facility where they are processing animals, she just decides to go to her little local town fair where they're having show animals and just chains herself to the fence. Because that's gonna do a whole lot for veganism. And I'm also gonna give you a little piece of info that she just conveniently decided to leave out. And that is the fact that she actually got charged for disturbing the peace and trespassing at the event. And even in that article, she just continues to try to play the victim. But I mean, I guess that's just what happens when you fuck around and find out. You straight up cope a wedgie from hell.
Just a few weeks ago, WAMN Media did an interview with an animal farmer discussing my last protest at the Royal Show and talking about whether or not I would come to this year's Royal Show.
As the Royal Show approaches, regional farmers are trying to discourage vegan activists like Tash Peterson from disrupting the event. In an exclusive interview, the Pastoralists and Graziers Association WA President Tony Seabrook stated that he and the farming community would be very disappointed if he shows up at the Claremont Showgrounds this year. Paige Reed begins our coverage.
Tony, thanks for your time. I want to start by talking about activist Tash Peterson. She has been very vocal in past years about her views on animals in the show. Do you expect her to make another show this year?
I couldn't possibly understand what her thinking is or whether she'd be there or not. It would be very disappointing if she was.
I wonder why he think it would be very disappointing if I came there. Is it because he has something to hide? Does he not like animal rights activists talking about the truth, that non-human animals deserve rights too?
You know, something tells me that's not the reason. I think it's because you're over there acting like an extremist psychopath who, instead of peacefully protesting, you're going out and disrupting all of the events. This is like trying to protest a football game and running out into the middle of the field butt-ass naked. And you know it's really bad when the news is name-dropping you for being fucking crazy. Like they're over here talking about her like she's some sort of felon or some type of murderer popping up on the news for the day. But I wouldn't say it's because you're over here telling the truth.
That they should not be enslaved, raped, tortured, abused, and murdered. Because that's exactly what the royal show is about. It glamorizes animal slavery, abuse, and murder, and normalizes viewing non-human people as food, objects, entertainment, and commodities, when they are people who have the right to live.
What in the actual fuck does that mean? Non-human people. So it's not a person then. The definition of people refers to human beings in general, or a considered collective of humans. And then the second definition doesn't do you any favors either, because it's only referring to humans. So what in the hell is a non-human people? I mean, when I look it up, the only thing I can find is the Non-Human Rights Project, which is just another crazy activist group. But I'm pretty sure the only thing that would meet the standard of this definition that they decided to make up is a freaking monkey, which isn't even at the show. They've got cattle, dogs, sheep, horses, but I don't see any monkeys. So I don't even think you agree with your own people on what you're saying right now. Like, what kind of goofy ass logic hoops are we jumping through when we're at the point to where two words are contradicting each other? And this kind of craziness and goofiness actually reminds me of a vegan teacher quote that can really apply right here.
This is the face of an unstable person.
Real world out there. The royal show, those animals are so pampered, they're so well cared for, they are spoiled, absolutely rotten.
Okay, so again, animals who are enslaved, raped, tortured, abused, and murdered. This farmer is so delusional, he's saying that they're pampered. I mean, when animals are forced into slaughterhouses and gas chambers, how on earth is that pampering? This guy's telling me to live in the real world, but he is actually living in a delusional world where he believes that farming animals to enslave, exploit, abuse, and murder them is some form of caring for them and pampering them. This is just sick.
There ain't no way the person who just used the term non-human people unironically is telling someone else they're delusional. And didn't even use the term correctly, since the common animals that would qualify as it under the US aren't even at the place. Like, I don't even know if it could get much more delusional. You literally are using this made-up word that contradicts itself in its own structure, and you're trying to use it to make some kind of point. And then she just uses the common trigger words to try to make things as awful as possible. And it's clear she has more empathy for animals than she actually does for humans. And notice how I have to say humans, because if I say people, I guess this crazy bitch is gonna think I'm talking about a dog or something. And it's almost as if she forgets that there are a ton of people who have experienced all of these crimes that she is now basically comparing to a pig, cow, dog, cat, whatever it is. And she doesn't even begin to think how it might make them feel that she's over here comparing the R word to animals in the same sense that it would mean to them. And it's just not worth the shock value, because at this point you're creating more anti-vegans than you actually are vegans. I don't know what you're trying to get done here. The only thing I can imagine is you're just trying to pat that OnlyFans and get as much ad revenue as possible.
What I would say to her is there's some appalling things happening to livestock out in the rangelands. Absolutely horrific. Get yourself tuned in. Find out what's happening and give us a hand to deal with wild dogs and what wild dogs are doing. It is so short-sighted, so insular. You know, the lady really does need to address the views that she holds.
So again, he's now actually shifting the problem onto wild dogs and other animals, and I'm assuming what he's talking about here is maybe the dingoes and other wild animals that come in and actually attack livestock, like sheep, etc. That's what I think he's saying here. So he's shifting the problem onto other animals, but the problem is non-vegans actually breeding sheep, cows, chickens, and other animals into existence to be abused and murdered. This is the real issue here. Animal slavery. I mean, this is literally the largest Holocaust in history, and this guy's just saying, why doesn't she try and sort out the real issues? Well, actually, those so-called issues you're talking about right now wouldn't exist if we didn't forcibly breed animals into existence to abuse and murder them. So this guy needs a reality check, and he needs to stop justifying animal abuse and murder. It's pretty fucking pathetic, and it's disgusting.
No, what's pathetic is you just actually compared this to the Holocaust. And then to go ahead and say it is the biggest Holocaust in history is just a whole different level. And what's really pathetic is the fact that you're all talk about all of this, and you actually profit off of it yourself. Because it seems like you use all this vegan BS just to promote your OnlyFans. And that's why in most of the videos on your channel, you're just out here in lingerie with the OnlyFans in the description of your channel. So instead of just coming to events like this and screaming like an idiot and creating more anti-vegans, why don't you take all this money that you're clearly making and you're even bragging about in some of your shorts and use it to actually invest into programs to help animals? Or create your own program since you're so worried about it. Or even go after some of these terrible facilities and attempt to sue them that are actually doing things the wrong way and killing animals in a very inhumane way. But instead you just sit there and decide to scream like a maniac and walk around half naked in public. So I don't know what you expect to happen.
I mean, there's no better place for any sheep to be than on a live export vessel. That is the most safest, secure, best welfare situation that's there, and she keeps using words like horrendous and horrific.
This guy must be completely ignorant as to what happens on a live export vessel, which I refer to as a live export death ship, because it is disgusting what happens in those ships. I mean, sheep and cows are crammed to the tens of thousands on these ships. They're forced to endure these horrific journeys for weeks, sometimes even months. They live in their own feces. Some of them even cook to death on these ships. And he's saying that's the best place for a sheep to be? No, it isn't. It's not the best place. Oh, and not to mention that these sheep arrive in destinations where they're just going to have their throat slit and head chopped off. This is actually scary to hear this, that an animal farmer is saying that this is the best place for a sheep to be. And the only reason he's saying that is because he makes profit off live export and sending animals to slaughterhouses. So he wants people to think it's a good thing, and he's trying to rid the guilt, because deep down he knows that he would never want to be in the position of those animals.
And then she tries to bring up this point about live export vessels, right? Which she does have a good point that it is possible for the animals to overheat and they can die or be cooked to death, like she said. But then that point becomes completely meaningless when you actually look at the mortality rates. You will see that it's barely any in comparison to how many are actually exported. So for example, we have 1,118,000 with only 1,290 mortality rates. Which, I mean, for her must be absolutely horrific, but it's really not that many, and it's very over-dramatized and over-exaggerated. And it kind of shows you how these different documentaries they watch and these different things kind of show you the very worst of the worst, when really on average, it's not that bad. And this goes across the board for both sheep and buffalo, to where it is not that many that are passing away on these ships. And after all of this, they pretty much just repeat their same talking points, and she goes on with the same trigger words that I don't want to have to sit here and play again. But for the most part, it's literally just the same exact arguments. And it's just more nonsensical vegan ranting that just ends up driving more people away from veganism than actually towards it. And it was just so goofy with her whole non-human person quote that I just had to comment on it. But with that all said, I think I'm done here. And I'm out. Watching that vegan teacher's daughter sit here and beef with a farmer. And peace.